Hello, you are watching and listening to an episode of Leaders and Engineers. My name is Nodorhan Yusupov, and today we are broadcasting from Tallinn, Estonia. Today our guest is an expert in political sciences and data sciences with a deep knowledge in statistics. He is a Bachelor of Arts in International Studies and PhD in political sciences from Florida State University, with about 20 years of experience in forecasting geopolitical events, conflict research, and political instability, like possibility of coups or revolutions. He served for 13 years in the Army National Guard, which is part of the United States Army. There he worked for 5 years as intelligence officer, leading soldiers such as from Geospatial Support Team and Support Engineering Battalion in Iraq. Later at Duke University as postdoctoral researcher, he delivered forecast analysis for the United States government and various research agencies within the United States government. And his latest publications were on such topics as a hybrid geopolitical event forecasting system and ensemble forecasting of irregular leadership change. So here, irregular means due to revolutions, for instance. He lives in Estonia and runs a data science consulting company, Basil Analytics. Please meet Dr. Andreas Beger.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
I'm good. Doing well.
So what are the latest research you've been doing and preparing to publish, maybe?
So we have the latest project I've been working on is to create something called political event data set. So this is where you sort of imagine you're taking the politics section of different newspapers across the world, and you're trying to extract different types of events from them. So this might be diplomatic events, like let's say if a country withdraws an ambassador from another country, could be sort of relief aid for disasters, and it could also be specific instances of reported fighting somewhere or terrorist attacks or something like this. And so you're trying to do this at scale from potentially up to millions of newspaper articles per month. And so we've been part of a team that's been working on creating sort of AI-based methods to extract those events and then process them, sort of clean them up and everything. So that's kind of broadly what I've been working on recently. So we have a couple of papers, or I'm sort of part of a team that has a couple of papers related to that hopefully at some point will be published.
Very interesting, and we will definitely talk more about this research and other research that you did. But I have another question before we come to the main part of the interview. Is that I saw on your LinkedIn page you're following Bundeswehr University Munich, and I wonder how you connected to it, or you had some kind of exchange with them, or
I don't have any like particular connection to them. They started organizing conferences that are sort of focused on the kind of work that I do. So where they basically bring in public researchers, in which I would sort of broadly include myself as well. And I think so last year, maybe the year before last, I presented. It was during COVID time, so it was remote, but they still do these every year, and now I think in person. So that's the loose connection.
All right. So I believe it's Bundeswehr is the army, German army.
Yeah.
This is also from military perspective brings interest to you.
I'm not sure there's any sort of. Yeah, I mean, this is very much sort of a academic research type affair. I'm not actually sure sort of how or to what extent the German military is connected to this. So I think, this is essentially, as far as I've interacted with it, it's basically a regular university research institution. And so, yeah, I mean, it'd be really interesting to know to what extent there's interest within the military there, but I just don't know.
Right. So probably you have seen, or I don't know if you have seen the previous podcasts. Do you know have you watched the previous one? So
I've skimmed a couple of the previous ones. So are you referring to like the literally previous one, or?
Well, I just think in the sense that if you know about the format, of course I will explain this again just to show. So in this podcast we try a mock-up of the job interview for imaginary company for the position which doesn't exist. It's a leadership position, of course, and leading the technical team. So in this case, that would be data scientists.
Mm-hmm.
And the purpose is that the people who are watching and listening us, they are still getting to know you, but also in the format of how it could be in the kind of job interview. So are you ready?
I am ready. Let's do it.
Okay. You want to take a seat?
I need to, be not nervous. I'm just kidding.
All right, so starting this job interview mode, and as usually I do, it's not the whole interview. Then I say this job interview is over. Then I'll ask you feedback. Was it similar to your previous experiences?
Mm-hmm.
And what are your impressions in general? All right. Hello, Andreas. Thank you for applying for a leadership position in our data science company. Our company helps to demolish governments. But recently we received a request from a group of monkey and parrots who ran away from their owners. They think they would be better leaders than humans and want to establish their colonies in Mars and Venus. In this leadership position, it's expected that you would lead a team of scientists, data scientists, and other type of scientists who will design mission to send monkeys to Mars to establish what they call United States of Mars, and parrots to Venus to establish United States of Venus. Then, with a team of data scientists, you're expected to do analysis of which government is better, of monkeys or of parrots. You will see a visualization of what I just told you on your screen.
Okay.
I will show it to Andreas.
This is, cool. Okay, I see the monkeys are definitely going for kind of a early American neoclassical vibe.
Oh yeah, and here is this
Parrots.
team of parrots.
It's interesting that they have a human butler, and some of them appear to have human-shaped cyborg bodies where only their heads are visible. So just on first impressions, I would say the parrots have some insane technology going on.
The interesting thing is that this image was generated with the help of AI.
Yes, of course.
And you see that there is a butler, human butler there.
Yeah.
And I didn't specify that there should be a human butler. I used exactly same prompt. I just replaced monkey with the word parrot.
What was the prompt?
It's basically was like this. Scene is Venus planet. Parrot is giving a speech to a group of parrots. All parrots are wearing tuxedos.
Ah, okay. Well, tuxedos, yeah.
Tuxedos.
So this, okay, I'm looking at the hands now. So this monkey appears to have, it could just be a human-shaped tuxedo, human-shaped body wearing a tuxedo with a monkey head.
Yeah.
It's just that the human body and monkey body are more similar to each other. And good news, it does mess up not just human hands, but, oh my God. The butler's hand it has some issues.
Yeah.
But it's also messing up the parrot's feet and the monkey. Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah.
Truth to be told, it was not easy to generate this.
Yeah.
It was not the first prompt. Initial prompt was much more detailed and elaborated,
Yeah.
but it totally confused AI.
I see.
But this is closest to what I wanted to visualize.
Yeah. So the Monkey Republic and the Parrot Republic. Okay.
One is on Mars and another is on Venus. So in this position, you're applying for this position, and my first question would be, why have you decided to apply for this position?
That is a good question, because you mentioned that the company, it specializes in overthrowing governments.
Yes.
Yeah, so maybe it would have some ethical reservations about working for this company, but let's assume I don't. Why am I applying to this position? Well, I don't know what we did to parents and the monkeys. And to be honest, that's, it's water under the bridge. We can't change it. but they have both they must have faced extreme adversity, being able to establish themselves and apparently prosper on Mars and Venus, both of which are quite hostile environments. So maybe there's something there that we can learn and adapt for our own use here on Earth, so that we can, of course, obviously here's the evil angle, so that we can reestablish human hegemony.
How do you say this word? Human
hegemony.
Okay.
Let's call it
I know what I mean.
Yeah. You got to be number one in the solar system again, because it sounds like right now the parrots or the monkeys, maybe or both, have us beat.
But how do you see your unique blend of expertise contributing to the mission of sending monkeys to Mars and parrots to Venus?
How do I see? That's a good question, because my first thought would be I don't. I think the main challenges they face are physical, not in terms of conflict. I mean, the way these things usually operate, I would assume that they have a quite sort of mission-oriented, hierarchical, autocratic type of setup going on. So there would be, I guess, one ship has the monkey captain who is lording it over the monkeys, and the other one has a parrot captain. Down the road, I suppose, you can start, maybe at some point they get to a level of complexity where they're trying to figure out how to set up their, they now decided that if we have reached a point we can have democratic governance or some other form of governance. And I suppose there, as a political scientist, I might have a thought or two.
All right. Now a bit moving, not exactly on this topic of this company. We'll come back to that. But what is your thought in general? There are in different countries certain politicians claiming that there exists a deep state. What is your personal opinion? Is there a deep state? Is it on national level or interstate level?
I don't think there is anything like an international deep state. This is, like many conspiracy theories, I just find it incredible that a large amount of people would be able to coordinate and do something in secret without somebody blabbering it out. And when you have, you get 100 people in a room, and I guarantee you it's not something that's not going to stay a secret. So I think anybody who's trying to guard secret recognizes that, because you have, very strict siloing and access control and stuff. But I think about the sort of regular deep state type question. I think there are two things going on. One, which I would say is legitimate. So unelected bureaucracies do have power. Like I think that's just a reality. What they do doesn't necessarily always align with sort of what the current politically elected government in power wants. This is maybe sort of one of the challenges of rulership, is how to get large bureaucracies to kind of, we get this large oil tanker of a bureaucracy to kind of change its course and start doing what you want it to do. And that's just, I think that's just, that's not, there's nothing like inherently evil about bureaucracies. I think that's just the nature of having very large organizations. I think probably, if you're the CEO of Microsoft, you don't snap your fingers and Microsoft suddenly changes what it's doing. You have the same problem where you need to kind of figure out how do you get a very large organization to do something differently in the way that you want it to do it. So that's sort of, bureaucracies exist. They're large.
But let's say what I understand by like deep state is basically the statement that, okay, this is the person who was elected and this is head of state. And those who claim that there is a deep state, basically they say that, okay, this is like the person you see, but the actual decision maker is not on this position. Could be like on some.
Yeah. So this is the second part that I wanted to address is, so I think this is used, this term specifically, and the way it's used is by let's say more authoritarian minded politicians who want to do things that maybe circumvent civil service protections that exist there for a reason, historical reason that we can talk about. But I think it's usually used by people who want to change the way that the government works in a specific authoritarian manner, who are frustrated because there are many people within the state, within the civil service bureaucracy, who will sort of stick to the rules and prevent people from doing the sort of things that either are outright illegal or they're for other reasons sort of prescribed. And so, yeah, of course, if I'm Trump and I I'm dissatisfied that somebody tells me I can't nuke I don't know, let's say whoever, because it's insane or something like this, then I might use the term deep state to express my frustration, and maybe it's just sort of a political marketing type play. But I don't think that so aside from large organizations, groups of people have a momentum, aside from that legitimate kind of thing, I don't think that there's some sort of unelected cabal of bureaucrats who are secretly running the show and circumventing kind of elected officials.
But here is a follow-up question. Wouldn't be it easy to rebuke those statements by being more transparent? So let's say when we see sometimes like Congress hearings, they are aired and everyone can watch who asked what and what they were talking about. But then there is a huge portion of things, starting with these negotiations and these political meetings, which go behind the closed door, so to say. What are you saying? Is it possible actually to achieve the case where it's like fully transparent, that you can see everything and all the decisions, how they're made and how they are being discussed?
I'm not sure. So I think you could make a case either that transparency would be helpful, but I think you could also make the case that like complete transparency might be harmful. And I think two reasons. So I don't think I need to make like a case for why transparency might be helpful. I think sort of on face value that seems more obvious, but I think maybe two reasons that it might not be helpful is, one is, the regular thing that happens in politics is that you get kind of selective sound bites or sort of selective interpretations of something without the broader context within which it happened. And so I think if you make things very transparent, I think this is just going to create more space for this sort of what I would call exploitation, opportunistic kind of leaking, or in this case not leaking, but opportunistic kind of presentation of something that happened as part of a negotiation process. I think the another reason is probably a lot of politicking involves sort of compromises and trades between different actors that maybe sort of at face value people wouldn't like, so I want A, so I'm willing to give the other person, compromise on issue B with the other person for the sake of getting, my way on issue A. And if I do this behind closed doors, then, okay, so people don't see where I'm willing to compromise and what I'm giving up to get something that I think my voters want. And so not sure that seeing kind of how the sausage is made, this is literally the example. Maybe sausage tastes better when you don't know what goes into it. I want to see the cheeks, ears, and everything. But so at the end of the day, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. But if we talk not about the government, but the corporate world. In corporate world, it's that you basically apply for a certain position, and probably being reviewed, and then you have this job interviews, and basically you get selected. How do you see it? Would it could have been better, in your opinion, if actually, let's say there is department and people giving choice to vote to select who will lead this department, who will be my manager, so to say. And maybe all the way to CEOs. I haven't also heard that people are selecting CEOs like this.
Probably not, because you're looking for people who are exercising roles that kind of, their role is not to kind of negotiate compromises between different factions. And maybe at the CEO level or at the C level, it kind of is more like that. But usually when you're hiring somebody in a company, you're hiring them for some sort of technical or sort of maybe non-technical, but similar kind of expertise that is acquired through years of experience and practice. So I'm not sure that kind of letting people vote for managers or whatever would, kind of produce good results in the end. And I guess the thing is, there's nothing to keep a company from trying sort of experiment with that. I'm sure that somebody somewhere has kind of tried approaches like this, and I'm guessing it probably hasn't worked out that well. So yeah, but I would contrast this with politics. Why don't we? I don't know if this is going to be a follow-up question, but why don't we do the same thing in politics? And I would say one reason is that sort of the point of electing, let's say, legislators in politics. It's these people do have actual, they need to have skills. One of which is being able to convince people to vote for them, and afterwards, sort of being able to do the actual politicking part and get things that will get their constituents to re-elect them in the sort of classical model. But aside from that, one function is just preference aggregation. So, voters can express in an ideal system, voters can express what they want from government through who they vote for. And that's fundamentally different from a corporation where, it's the workers are sort of would be the equivalent of the bureaucracy that do things. The voters are more the shareholders who ultimately, at least in principle, the CEO and the board are.
That's actually interesting. It just came to my mind the thought that normally shareholders will vote for the CEO position, but that's then like kind of one-sided representation. If they can, then why cannot the employees also give their?
I suppose if they're shareholders, then they can. But I'm not an economist. I don't know a lot. I'm sure people have studied kind of shareholder company relations.
But you did the political sciences. I believe there is a lot of politicking in the corporate world. So.
Oh, for sure. Well, yeah, this turns out maybe not so much overlapping between that kind of politicking and what I studied. But I think, if you're a shareholder of a corporation, it's a very narrow, specific area that is a very small part of your life. Whereas, sort of how you vote as a citizen has a potentially much larger impact on your daily and long term on your life. And you also have less do potential CEOs did a campaign for office? I'm not sure. Maybe they do. But as a shareholder, you probably just have also a lot less information to be able to kind of informatively pick between different CEO candidates.
Well, but let's come back to this forecast. This is the topic of your research that you've been doing.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see that your forecast model can be applied not only for the governments, but actually in the corporate world?
Yeah. So actually,
let's say to predict irregular leadership change.
So there are, and just to clarify, by the way, so, the work that most of the work I do technically, it's sort of in the research world. So a lot of it is exploring, whether forecasting something is feasible at all and sort of how well you can do it or not do it. And a lot of the consumers are actually sort of NGOs and other actors that are sort of mostly dealing with thinking about ways to address the kind of bad stuff that you might want to forecast. But about the our corporations doing this, so there's a market for risk management. So for example, supply chain risks. So like let's say, I think a lot of cacao or something like this is grown in West Africa, which also has a history of conflict. And so if you know that there might be some trouble brewing in I don't know, the Ivory Coast or Ghana or something like this, then that might be information that would be useful to companies to, to the Swiss giants of the chocolate world, or
whether to invest more or not.
Or sort of whether to kind of try to do something to make your supply chain more robust. But so basically, there's a market. There's a sort of market of corporate risk prediction, which has various applications. Yeah, but the other one you mentioned is, of course, also sort of how safe is it to invest in this country or not. And
let's say it's a bit different, but still, would it be possible to, let's say, run the model to predict which person is likely to be promoted, which person is likely to leave the company?
Okay, so this is more on the sort of general data science side. I mean, like with all of the prediction kind of forecasting questions, it's always possible. The question is whether it will be accurate enough to be useful, and this I don't know. I mean, I would guess probably if you're like looking which employees are likely to leave the company, depending on what sort of inputs you can get, and I'm guessing maybe you could do a reasonably well job of it. Maybe it would add something that whoever's interested in this doesn't pick up by themselves. So I don't know. This is so, I mean, but yeah, this is, you do experiments and you don't know until you try it out, in a lot of cases.
I see a point. But speaking about the accuracy, so in the domain where you feel much more confident, so these geopolitical events, how high is the accuracy? How high you achieved, basically?
So this is a world of rare things. Or in kind of in data science terms, there's a lot of class imbalance. Like most of the cases are going to be zeros. Like, maybe at best 1 in 100, maybe 1 in 10,000 is going to be the one thing that you're trying to anticipate. And this is just from the setup of the problem, very difficult to do. So, you can do models and you get some level of accuracy. I think the way maybe it's kind of hard to convey what that accuracy is in an understandable term. Maybe a better way to look at it is, I think the application of these models. Let me backtrack a little. One thing they don't do is tell you that tomorrow there's going to be a coup in this country. So this doesn't happen. Nobody can do this. Not a human analyst, not an AI, some convolutional neural net of something or another. It just doesn't exist. We're talking about varying like shades of uncertainty. What models can add, I think, is basically, we know from the people who have studied how humans make forecasts. Okay, so think about a regular analyst, or I don't know, maybe this person is like a Ghana expert. Let's go back to Ivory Coast or something. They're an expert in this country. You ask them, what's going to be the chance of civil war or another coup or something like this? And it turns out that one of the things that's really important for people to do a good job at forecasting is being aware of base rates. So this is, if I randomly pick a country out of the hat, the chance of a coup in any given year is maybe 1 in 100 or 2 in 100, depending on the year. And so if you're making a forecast, your starting position is, well, most likely nothing's going to happen. And so what these models add is that instead of just having kind of a naive base rate of, well, 1 or 2 countries per year have coups, so the probability that I start out with is 1 or 2%. So what these models add is they give you a broader spread, and that spread is not very big. So you might go from, it's basically 0 chance of a coup in Germany or in the UK, to maybe saying that there's a 10% chance of a coup in some other country over the next year. which is still not very high, but you get a larger spread. And so if you're human analysts now, you don't start out at 1% everywhere. You can sort of say that, okay, well, despite some concerning news, probably nothing's going to happen in the UK. Whereas if you're looking at this other country that had 10% and you see some concerning news, then maybe you're more willing to kind of go out and say that, yeah, okay, maybe something's going to happen here next year. And so these models kind of, they're not an oracle, but they give you a better place to start out with as a person who can incorporate other information.
But I understand about the complexity of doing these predictions. But have you had where you had kind of maybe example where you really were close to make a good prediction that something will happen?
Yeah. So, this earlier project I was involved in with predicting irregular leadership changes. So this is when a country's leader is removed through sort of unexpected means that don't conform to whatever kind of system of government that country has, which usually could be a coup or a revolution are the most common kind of ways. And so for a while we were generating regular forecasts for our customer, and I think it was in 2017. I think there was a coup in Thailand, maybe, where we did quite well on our predictions. So, yeah, we've had some cases where we said that there's a high risk of something happening here, and it turned out to be happening. Which is nice. I mean, it's nice kind of in the sense of it's obviously not nice and that something bad happened, but it's nice in the sense that the model at least added some value in this case maybe. So there are some success cases in terms of the accuracy like that, but I mean, most of the time these things don't happen. So it's just sort of being able to filter out countries where it's probably not going to happen at all.
But when you do this analysis, this forecast reports, how do you usually handle those? You just act as an observer, or you actually also supply those reports with the suggested actions and then giving this like to governments?
Well, okay. So I'll give you an example. So one other project that I was involved in was trying to predict the chances that there would be kind of either improvements or worsenings in different aspects of governance for different countries. And so this is something where the end product was a public dashboard that had sort of forecasts that we updated once a year. And anybody can look at that. Anybody can consume it. We kind of provided some aids a little bit to try to like make interpretation easy, but probably it still requires some like technical, at least being comfortable with probabilities and numeric predictions like that. But in terms of actions, I mean, there are, I think, two problems here. One of which is particular to this domain, the other one which isn't. So for one that's particular to this domain is, I mean, these are very large, sort of abstract, high-level events. And I mean, it's kind of similar to, like, let's say, how do you get democracy in a country? How do you get a country that doesn't have coups? Well, you have to be wealthy. And that wealth should not come from like oil or other like natural resource extraction. It should be wealth that's built on like a modern service economy. That's the key. That's what you need to do to be successful. This isn't something that you can just kind of snap your fingers and implement. So a lot of this stuff depends on kind of slow-moving, large-scale societal patterns and trends and levels and stuff. And so, there nothing I do kind of suggests obvious actionable things.
One thing was that you were observing what are the publications, but also do you track or do you work with data from social media?
Let me just put a reminder there, the second issue with giving actionable insights. But so at the scale that I have done stuff, the social media kind of indicators haven't been really useful, because it's sort of, we're talking about forecasts that are 6 months, a year, 2 years out. So over what are the probabilities that something's going to happen in the next 6 months or the next year or the next 2 years? Where social media, this might be more useful kind of for more shorter term predictions. But that said, kind of social media stuff it's not a magic bullet. It's a lot of noise. And there are some projects, some people who have found kind of ways to extract something that's useful. But there's no easy kind of push button ready to go solution. Even though lots of people are still trying to find something like that. It's just, it's just a lot of noise.
Okay.
But to go back to the other about actual insights, the other issue is, and I think this is more broadly relevant for kind of the way that data sciences is done. When you're talking about actual insights, what that translates to in terms of the kind of modeling that you do is not predictive modeling. Actually, it's causal modeling. Because you want to, if you recommend that somebody does action A to improve an outcome, you aren't doing that action to actually translate into an improvement in outcome, and for that you need to have a causal relationship between what you recommend and what is happening, as opposed to a spurious relationship. So I don't know if it was with you or somebody else who mentioned there's a correlation between murder rates and ice cream sales. So you can take ice cream sales. If you have data on ice cream sales, you can throw that into a predictive model, forecasting model, and you can predict murder rates.
Interesting.
Yes. So, and if your goal is prediction and ice cream sales is the only data you have, then fantastic, mission accomplished. The problem is it's obviously not a causal relationship. So ice cream, selling ice cream, despite the sugar rush people might get, it doesn't lead them to murder more people. The thing is that both depend on temperature. You sell more ice cream in the summer, and there's more crime in the summer than in the winter. And so, to go back to what we were talking about in terms of actual insights. So let's say if I'm not aware of that, and I create a predictive model, ice cream sales, murder rates, it's working great. And then I go around, I charge people, we're talking about city governments, I can charge them millions, hopefully. And I tell them that, the way to solve crime is to ban ice cream sales. Well, next summer, it's going to turn out that even though they ban ice cream sales, murder rates are not changing. If anything, it might go up because people are angry. It's a silly example, but I think it's easy when you haven't been exposed to the sort of idea of causal modeling to assume that if you have a predictive model, that you can just kind of use that to derive these actual insights.
But connected to this, one thing is that irregular change, but let's say if we talk about elections, which is like regular change, there was in regards to 2016 election in the United States, when Trump was elected, there was a lot of debate in the United States about potential meddling of Russia in those elections. So happened kind of regular change, but was those elections influenced? And the question is, how do you measure, let's say, influence of one country over elections of another country? How would you approach this, or is it possible at all to make it accurately?
So I know that there are, within political science, I would guess computer science as well, that there are people who have looked at this question. So was there kind of systematic Russian influence on the U.S. in 2016, and did it influence the election outcomes? And just to kind of jump to the conclusion, I think the conclusion was that there was an attempt at systematic influence, but it probably it wasn't large enough to affect the outcome of the election. But as far in terms of how to do that, I don't know. I don't know what people have done. My first guess would be is that you look at places that were exposed, so you probably have some variation in exposure to Russian influence attempts, and yet you try to leverage that variation in exposure to see whether. So you have some variation in exposure to Russian influence, then you can create some model of expected support for Trump or expected support for Clinton, and you try to see whether the variation in Russian influence is related to the variation in the sort of deviation from the vote outcomes, the preferences that you expected from the observed. And if there's some correlation, then maybe you can conclude that places that were exposed to more Russian influence tended to lean more towards Trump than we would have expected, given the fundamentals, how well is the economy doing, all that stuff. And then maybe you can conclude that, there seems to have been some effect. That would be this is not exactly my sort of area, but I'm not, there's probably large body of work that is relevant to this, but that would be my sort of first guess. But yeah, very interesting. I haven't actually dug into to see how people have approached this.
It's just, with this one, I have another question connected. Just the question, if you buy ads in the social media, whatever, it's Facebook or Twitter and all that, which is now X, and then, yeah, have to say this.
That's right, yeah, formerly known as Twitter.
Yep, and if you put something looking like realistic, probably nowadays it's very easy with the deepfakes to make it. With all this technology and with the social medias, is it really so easy to influence people choices?
I think it depends on what we're trying to influence. So if it's if it's a relatively consequential choice.
Well, starting from elections, ending going on protests, maybe.
Yeah. Okay, so we're not talking about which chocolate I'm going to buy. We're talking about who I'm going to vote for. I think when it comes to voting, probably not. I think it depends more on especially in the U.S. context. I mean, it's increasingly sort of been tied to people's identity, and that is much harder to change than sort of maybe what you had more of before, which were kind of issues-based voters who were more responsive to kind of changes in positions. By the way, again, this is a different area of political science than what I studied. But
what did you study?
International relations and comparative politics. So this would be international relations has the sort of conflict stuff, civil war, and it also has the kind of interstate relations, and specifically within that, the part that kind of more studied was interstate conflict. Comparative politics, there are also different flavors, but for example, why do countries become democratic? How did democracy kind of arise in the first place? What impact do different kinds of electoral systems have on the number of political parties that exist in the country, stuff like this. But about so changing people's votes, I mean, I think it's a hard thing to do because it depends more on your identity, it depends on the people around you, sort of your social environment. Probably depends for most people in the US, depends more on are you watching Fox News or not?
Let's imagine that you are buying ads in Facebook, and you have two posters. One poster says that I'm all to be more open and let's get more immigrants. And then you set in the settings of this ad, show this to people who are outside of in the US or just arrived. And then another poster says, no to immigrants, we should close and ban. And then you target the audience which is against immigrants. Will it be kind of you can get votes from here and then you can get votes from here by delivering this to separate?
Oh, you mean so one candidate is sending differential messages?
I mean about this kind of technologies where you actually can play it nicely in such a way that you maximize your votes And in that sense, if you play it nicely, you yourself maybe.
I mean, I don't think so. If we're talking about like I want to become president, and so I'm trying to kind of play both sides. I don't think this would work because, there are still older type, I'll call them older types of TV, basically speeches, in-person speeches, where you have to pin yourself to one position, and it's not going to be that easy to kind of support both sides at the same time, unlike with sort of targeted ads. The less so I think this this kind of thing wouldn't work because at some point it's going to become apparent that you're deceiving somebody. I think what a different question, which I'm guessing probably the sort of more savvy campaigns are already using, not just in the US but everywhere, is maybe maybe you're the Liberal Party candidate. And you think that voters might vote for you for different reasons, and so you try to target which issue area or something you emphasize for different sort of potential segments of voters that might support you. I think that I would guess that's already happening, and if not, it probably makes sense because, I mean, I don't think these ads have a large impact, but they do on the margin probably have some measurable small impact.
So you now live in Estonia. How long you been living here?
It will be exactly 10 years in June.
Well, quite a significant number.
Yes.
Statistically speaking, probably.
It is. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm fairly sure it's close to 10 years. The margin of error, I think, is not that big yet.
So you are from the political science background, also working lots with the data, doing this data science. Imagine that if you were advisor to Estonian government, what advice would you give them to change or improve in Estonia?
Within Estonia itself?
Yes.
Honestly, I don't know. I think I say this for two reasons. I mean, one is that I despite being here 10 years, I wouldn't say that I'm very connected to what is going on here in politics. Partly it's a language sort of barrier issue for me. I mean, I can get by in the grocery store and restaurants, but I don't read the politics news. So I wouldn't want to presume that I kind of know better. I think the other reason is that, I mean, in terms of actual governance, to me, the Estonian government seems very competent. My interactions have usually been sort of quite efficient, and when I've asked people for help, they have responded sort of in helpful, competent ways. And I would contrast that with some of the experiences I've had in the US, and I think for Estonians, it's maybe hard to understand what it's like to interact with a large bureaucracy, where sort of the person you're interacting with doesn't have the power and doesn't know who has the power to help you with an issue you might be having. This sort of dealing with the faceless bureaucracy. I think this doesn't exist here. So I mean, I'm quite happy with the governance itself.
I think maybe you mean this National Transport Administration, when you need to get the driver license or deal with the car.
In the US?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess that's one of the classical jokes of having to stand in line at the Department of Motor Vehicles, and in the case of Florida, where I lived, in DMV. Yeah. See, I'm trying to think. Oh, okay, so one concrete example. Because I'm a U.S. citizen, I need to declare my income taxes in the U.S. no matter where I live. And so obviously when I moved to Estonia, in the sort of first year when I'm confronted with this issue, I had to figure out how my taxes in the US were going to work and figure out how my taxes in Estonia were going to work. And my specific situation is I don't get paid through an Estonian company. My income, my consulting income, mostly comes from, at that time, sorry to backtrack. At that point, actually, I was still working for Duke University. So I was being paid by a US university, living in Estonia. So, when I opened up my Estonian tax declaration, nothing was pre-filled for me. And so I was talking to my wife about it. I was like, I tried reading through the US Estonia have a tax treaty, and I tried reading through it, trying to understand kind of what I need to do. And my wife suggested, why don't you just email the tax authority? And coming from the US, I thought this was for sure going to be a waste of time. Like I didn't even think about it. But so I did. I sent an email to the Estonian tax board, and I sent an email to in the US, the IRS, the equivalent sort of tax authority. And I asked them about one specific question, and I included a paragraph of the US Estonian tax treaty that I wasn't sure I was interpreting correctly. So I said, my question, here's my situation, here's my question, here's the paragraph that I think is relevant. I don't understand whether I'm interpreting it right. I think maybe it was the next day, if not then the day after that. So within 2 days for sure, I got an answer back from the Estonian tax board. Nice answer. They said, oh yeah, okay, just put that number in table 8.3 or something like this. Okay, that's answered my question. Thank you. So the clock is ticking. I don't hear back from the IRS. The clock is ticking. 2 weeks later, I finally heard back from the IRS. They didn't answer my question. They responded with something along the lines of, the US and Estonia have a tax treaty. Here's the relevant paragraph. And they copy-pasted the exact same paragraph that I had asked them a question about. So yeah,
Do you think it's due to the size, or what are the factors? Yeah,
I think so. For the US, if you're compared with the US specifically, I think one is size. I think anybody who's kind of worked in smaller companies, larger companies, understands that size translates into bureaucratic hurdles. And so it's even more so for governments. The US is a very large place compared to Estonia. But I think in the US case, another factor also is that in a lot of cases, government services are intentionally underfunded in sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Then this loop kind of is, and it doesn't happen everywhere, but it happens. It's not uncommon. This loop is that government is inherently inefficient, so therefore we shouldn't waste resources on government, which means that you get sort of underfunded, understaffed agencies that need to do something, which translates into terrible experiences as a taxpayer, in my case, with that underfunded agency, which then again reinforces the, government is inherently inefficient. And so I think, but to basically boil that down, I think what doesn't help in the US is that the IRS has sort of been underfunded. I think they're actually, and we can again ask the economists, but I think there are actually sort of arguments out there that, you could, up to a certain point, you could increase the IRS's budget, and it would actually more than pay for itself in increased tax revenue through reducing tax evasion.
So yeah, if you make your tax system more efficient, then it's...
Well, yeah, in this case, I think it's more efficient, and also having enforcing, making sure that people are actually paying as much as cracking down on tax evasion, which I guess right now there isn't a lot of money within the IRS to do that. Obviously at some point, you're going to overshoot, but I think this is a little bit like there's room for productive investment. But I mean, if you don't want to have big government, then doing this thing is it's like it's a good approach. It makes sense.
Now I will ask you questions which were generated with the help of ChatGPT. basically how those questions were generated is that when I introduced you, I used the same script I gave to ChatGPT, and I said, look, this is the company I'm hiring, so please help to make those questions. And I think ChatGPT did it quite well. If you don't like the questions, then all complaints to ChatGPT.
I have to get my little bits into the future training data for AI overlords. I accept your rule without reservations. Don't send me to the camps. Anyways, let's see what it has.
That's a good joke. Hopefully it's not coming through.
Hopefully it remains a joke.
Yes. So the first question is, drawing from your experience in the Army National Guard, can you share an example of a challenging leadership situation you faced and how you successfully navigated it?
It's the successful part, I guess, is a requirement for the questions. I think...
well, it doesn't have to be successful, just an experience.
Yeah. I mean, and so, my leadership experience kind of consists of, at some point I became an intelligence officer, I was a staff officer in a battalion. There are many different staff officers for different fields, so I just happened to be the one for intelligence. And I had a team of 5 to 10 soldiers working under me. And I think, and this sort of people I went to Iraq with, one big challenge that I had is that the staffing, I think, was, I don't know when it was created, probably during the Cold War or something like this. It was created kind of with fighting a conventional war in mind. And so I had, most of my people were not actually intelligence analysts, they were combat engineers. And, maybe if you're in a situation where you're driving around and temporarily setting up shop and then have to move somewhere else, maybe that makes sense. But we were in one location trying to support kind of counterinsurgency, counter IED stuff, counter roadside bomb stuff. And so there was a kind of skill mismatch between what I thought we needed to do and sort of what my people were trained to do. That was just, I'm not sure that I ever kind of figured out a way to deal with that in a completely satisfying way. I mean, one obvious approach is you try to find sort of maybe a little bit creatively, try to find tasks that you could potentially sort of engage with that would be more suitable for some people who are not necessarily trained as intel analysts. And that worked to some extent. I think the other one was basically trying to rescope people. So you take a person who has been trained in this and you kind of try to retrain them a little bit to help do something else. Which, I mean, it's ad hoc. We were there for a limited time, and so we did our best, but ultimately it was just not a very satisfying situation because it's difficult when you're sort of, there's a mismatch between skills and requirements. Yeah. And unlike just some context, unlike a regular company sort of business in the business world, we went there with the people we went there and that was it. And so you have to work around that. You can't really, you can't hire and fire people when you're on some combat outpost in Iraq.
It's close to this change management topics because here you mentioned the skills and the need for the retraining. But regarding this change management, I also have one example case for you. Imagine that your company has decided to transition from its current project management software to a more advanced and integrated system. And this change will impact all the departments, requiring employees to learn new tools and processes. So you know that some employees might be resistant to the change. And the question here is, how would you identify and address their concerns? So I think this is a bit related to what you experienced with your team.
Uh, yeah, I mean, I think there are two kind of large scale thoughts that I have. Is depends a little bit on, like, ideally this would have been done for a good reason, and there would have been communication about why is there a switch to new procedures and a new system, and why do we need to spend time relearning something that we're presumably have been able to do so far. So you have to try to explain to people why they need to switch. But I think the flip side of that coin is, changes are never written in stone. So depends a little bit, on how certain is it that this switch really is going to happen. And this is not something that I think, when you sort of collect issues and send them up, and the other way you collect kind of arguments for why the switch is needed, and why it's worthwhile to invest time in this and push them down to your team. And at the end the change happens, or maybe if enough people grumble and things percolate up, then maybe comes out that this change is not worth doing.
But you are talking more about the organic way of introducing change, maybe over even a really long period of time. But let's say that this is like must-have condition given by your superiors, and in short period of time, let's say in a couple of days, you need to implement this change.
Mm-hmm.
Then what would be your actions basically? How would you introduce this change?
Well, I mean, I think the main thing is trying to get people on board with it. So I would try to explain why we need to do it. And I mean, I think, there's going to be a segment of people who just don't care one way or another. They'll be fine with it. But for the people that are resistant, I think, it might help on the margin to kind of hammer some reasons for why this change needs to happen and what the benefit will be. But at the end of the day, I think, people will grumble at if it's a must-have. So, yeah.
But let's say if you talk about this a new software and a new tool, and people need to retrain it and get new skills, can you kind of model what you would say to them, to those people who are resisting this change?
Okay, I'm just going to make something up. I'm make my own justifications. Yeah. Look, Galvin guys. We're not a small startup anymore. We're growing larger. So, the people that are now way up in the top in the towers, they need to have better visibility on these sort of larger scale processes that we're dealing with, and so we can't use this small software because it doesn't let us do reporting, it doesn't let us do this, it doesn't let us do that. So we need to switch over. The switch is going to happen no matter how much you grumble, whether you like it or not. Oh, let's just get it over with. I also don't like reinventing the wheel, but even though it doesn't appear to be very different from us, it's going to be useful to other people in our organization. So we just have to get through it. And hey, this is actually used by a lot of other companies. So once you know it, it's going to be a useful, valuable skill for you down the road if you decide to kind of, pursue your career at some other place. So stop the grumbling and get to it.
All right. Well, I think you did it quite. It was really nice how you gave this example with how you would one of the ways to implement this change management. But talking about the other kind of challenges, not necessarily maybe about the change management, and also coming back to the company that you're applying to this mission that we're sending to Mars, to Venus. So there is this kind of situation.
Okay, we need to take a break. I thought I turned my work focus on, but apparently I did not.
Unexpected geopolitical challenge have surfaced on Mars. Two rival factions among the monkeys have emerged, each claiming a right to govern, and potential for conflict jeopardizes the establishment of the United States of Mars. How would you use your geopolitical expertise to navigate these challenges and ensure the success of the colonization mission?
It depends on what they're fighting over. So is it zero sum or not? If it's zero sum, then we're screwed. That's much harder to resolve through compromise.
Could you give example with this zero sum, for instance? What could be done?
So in the Mars context, I have a hard time, but let's say, this is just a stupid example because I can't think of a better one. It's we want to build the capital on the South Pole and the other ones want to build the capital on the North Pole. This is maybe something like where you can't find a compromise. Maybe you can build on the equator, I guess, but you just have two different opinions and it's like a matter of preference. Mm-hmm. And so, if it's an issue like this, there's no room. Basically, there's no negotiation space because anything one group gets comes at the expense of the other. So this is difficult. And I think here, one cynical solution might be to provide them with a common enemy. So let's prepare our invasion fleet. It's a silly example, of course. But if it isn't, if it's not assuming it's not a zero-sum kind of issue, it's something where there actually can be some sort of compromise reached. Maybe, just again speculating, maybe the issue is sort of ensuring that the agreement will be maintained after it is reached, and so maybe there's some room for Earth to step in as a kind of guarantor of mutually acceptable guarantor of the agreement in some way. Yeah. Let's hope it all works out. They're monkeys. They're social creatures.
But let's say first for you would be to identify if it's basically there is possibility for compromise and if it's not. So in any case, it means that if you don't see there is possibility for compromise, then in this case the mission failed. Would be.
Yeah, I mean, if it's that extreme, so if it's an issue that could potentially result sort of in the total failure of this Mars project, one, I would think that both sides would kind of recognize that failing to reach an agreement means failure, which isn't necessarily always something that works. It's a sort of prisoner's dilemma.
Let's put it this way. Let's say, there is this conflict emerging on Mars. At the same time, we had parrots on Venus. So would you conclude that the Venus project is better for governance? So parrots managed it better, basically.
Assuming so, the parrots don't have conflict, the monkeys have conflict.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And they're both, everything else is the same.
Yes.
Yes, I would say probably the parrots are in a better place, assuming everything else is the same.
But let's give it a twist. What if parrots introduced the authoritarian system and they don't have this pluralism of opinions? But the monkeys, they're exactly split it because of the full-blown democracy.
Okay, yeah, no, this is good. This is much better. So, I mean, this authoritarian parrot system, I mean, sort of by definition, it has to be repressive. Otherwise, there would be no need for it. I mean, it wouldn't be an authoritarian government otherwise. And so, yeah, there's no diversity of opinion, but it's probably because anybody who doesn't agree with the, I guess, parrot dictator, Ross Perot, parrot. Let's call him Ross Parrot as the dictator. Just gets dropped out of. I assume they're living in these sort of blimp habitats that float around the atmosphere because it's such a high pressure environment. Anybody who has a dissenting opinion gets dropped into the boiling acid clouds that are below them, and so then it's easy. Yeah, everybody's on board. Not sure that's a society that all parrots want. Then the monkey society, well, if it's a conflict that the political system cannot peacefully resolve, then maybe their political system has some deficiency. Now the issue is you can't, from the outside in, impose a new one. So unfortunately, the best option. So if attempts to mediate or sort of serve as a neutral observer, guarantor of some sort, if none of that works out, there just may be nothing better to do than let it take its course, because we can't step in from the outside and impose a solution. It's just most likely not going to work.
But imagine this situation when it's kind of there are elections, and then there is a situation where it's like 49% versus 51%, so it's like nearly half split. And then basically, one is like one. You say it's like 51%, but isn't it some kind of like I don't know, oppression that this 49 have to live with the results which voted this other 51? Will it be a stable political system, or should it be done differently in that sense?
It can be stable as long as it's not always the same 49% that end up losing. If it's always the same 49% that consistently end up losing, and it's the same 51% that end up consistently winning, then I mean, I would guess there seems to be something wrong about it, and I don't think this would be something to last. I mean, this could work as long as there's alternation of power, and so you win one day, you lose the other day, and overall the system is working out for you because you don't have civil wars to resolve disagreements. But if it's a consistently this sort of situation, then then I mean, maybe there is nothing to do but split. But I find it hard to.
From the real life example, it was the case with this Brexit vote on the referendum. It was nearly around this 49, 50 something, and not really like election between, okay, this time this Labour Party wins, then second time the Conservatives party wins. Here we have kind of like chance to replay.
But I mean that is something. So there was a small victory for leaving, but that has changed over time, and I think at least in principle, it's possible for the UK to come back into the EU, although. I mean, it would take a long time. It would take several years, probably. But I think another exception might be like, we can have majority rule like in regular issues and things. But let's say if 51% votes to kill the other 49%, I mean, that's not really democracy, sort of, in the way you would think about it. It's like. There's a sort of constrained space of issues to which this sort of stuff applies, and then there's a sort of fundamental space of, poorly worded fundamental rights.
All right,
parrot rights, monkey rights.
Moving to the next question. As a leader, you are faced with a public relations challenge. A well-known scientist questions the scientific validity of the mission, and his opinion gains traction in the media. How would you address this criticism and maintain public trust?
Well, is it valid criticism? If it's valid criticism, then you should incorporate. You should sort of address it constructively. Obviously, because you want the mission to succeed. If it's like the flat Mars theory, and it's gaining traction, I don't know how you address that because, I mean, that's obviously also a real world issue, and I don't think anybody has figured out how to.
But let's imagine that it's not valid criticism.
Okay, flat Mars theory.
Yeah, yes, but it's like shit hit the fan, and it's like all over everywhere, and everyone's like talking. Then how would you come out from that?
Well, I mean, if it's possible to just let everybody talk about it and lose interest, then I would say let's go with that. Obviously, it also depends on how people are talking about it. Are they ridiculing it? Are they not? But let's assume it's the like worse scenario where people are taking it seriously. Just weird because how did you get to flat Mars? But anyways, yeah, I mean, I think the easiest, like, best solution would be to let people talk, kind of let the media storm go through it until there's a new topic of the day.
But you would do, let's say, no comment from your side, or you would actually actively involve in the debates.
I'm not a PR person, but my guess would be then it's when it's something that's like wrong, like obviously incorrect, then the best solution is to not engage with it and to just kind of let it do its rounds until it naturally, organically dies off. And again, yeah, if it doesn't, if for some reason now there's a cult of flat Marsers on Mars, and okay, you know, if it, let's say it threatens the overall mission, or let's say it threatens the existence of other people on Mars, then at some point, yeah, you probably need to address it. But how, I mean, it just depends on so many different things. I don't know. And hypothetical with hypothetical on top of a hypotheticals.
It's actually, I would say, quite relevant question in many different setups. Because if someone wants to start the rumors behind your back, or even like in the company, it can really undermine your chances probably to grow in the career or even to keep your position. And how much you can do is like when it's like all over spread. Will you go one by one and talk to everyone and try to explain? But is it feasible?
Yeah, I mean, sort of in a company context, that somebody's obviously spreading false rumors about you. I mean, I sort of preface that I haven't worked in large companies aside from, I guess, if you count the U.S. military. I mean, it sounds like an HR issue to me. So if somebody's sort of spreading demonstrably false claims against you to other people, then that seems like a larger company issue. So I would not go and confront that person in person, unless there's a reason to think that they're like doing this in good faith because they just misunderstood something that happened. Okay, in that case, yeah, maybe it makes sense to talk to this person, but let's assume this is intentionally malicious. Yeah, I mean, I think this is a issue for like HR or company leadership to address, not for me. And if they don't address it, then, I think that would be a sign to exit, which maybe doesn't speak well for the health of the company itself, but yeah.
All right. Coming back to your team that you're leading, team of scientists, you face unforeseen challenge that you got the equipment broken, that hard to get with the training and control the sparrows and the monkeys, and this affects the morale. And some scientists, they started expressing doubt about the feasibility of the project, given all these complexities involved. So you as a leader, how would you address the team's concern, boost morale, and ensure everyone remains focused and committed to the mission?
Well, again, so is there a point to the complaints? Like, are these actually valid complaints? Like, there's a bigger issue that needs to be potentially addressed. Like, are we doing, so I'm just going through like different scenario, but let's say one question would be, are we actually doing something that's the equivalent of busy work? In which case, maybe that's a kind of larger issue about shutting down a project and finding something more gainful to work on that will result then in turn on positive feedback and stuff, so that people understand that it's important to get positive feedback and stuff like this. But let's assume it's a valid project. That's not the issue. Then I think the second step for me would be like I would probably question myself, like, did I understand sort of how these people are motivated and what kind of feedback they need to be engaged and sort of engaged. So second step would be to think, like, am I doing something wrong as a leader? Which is easy for me to say because in my previous leadership. So let's say the summary of my previous leadership experience was that leadership is hard, and it's a skill that requires experience and effort. It's a developable skill, and so maybe I need to do some developing myself to find a way to get these people back on board.
Better. But when it comes to identifying what motivates these people and what to say to them, sounds a bit like this data that you need somewhere to collect. And
I think it's yeah, and I think this is a technical issue. I think this is a question of like emotional intelligence and empathy.
But how would you collect this data? You would talk to the person and then you write some kind of summary just to get some points, or you let's say we'll give them some kind of test with 50 questions to understand?
No, definitely not. No. I would not do quantitative assessment. I mean, if I was like running HR, I would maybe think of doing something like this as a company, but probably not. No, I mean, I think it's just it sounds stupid, but it's just talking to people and trying to understand where they're coming from. Just, especially when you're working like in this more tech world, maybe I know for me, it's not something that I'm naturally very skilled at.
Yeah.
And yeah. So talk to people, or maybe ask for advice from sort of people that I think are better at this. And so how would they address this? What do they think about this situation? Yeah, but I definitely don't think that. I definitely don't think this is hey, take this 50% question because this is going to determine whether and how I give you feedback. I think this. I mean, I wouldn't say that there's maybe something inherently wrong with that. I think it's just take it. You don't give a person a 50 question questionnaire and kind of as their first impression.
Well, I would assume maybe as a data scientist, he would be tempted to make some kind of chart over the.
I mean, if you wanted to do something like this, it would have to be you have to find like a fun way of doing it. But this may be potentially like backhanded and shady. So
no. There was one company, and it's international company, but also present in US. They I think it was 1 or 2 years ago, probably 2 years ago, they fired the people based on the input from the data collected by the system, and the system made a conclusion. So basically, their system tracked how people use the computers, how much they worked on a computer, how much they didn't work, and what they were doing and browsing and so on. So it basically tracked all these activities, and then automatically made decision whom to fire.
Yeah, how's that company doing today?
But what are you saying about this kind of approach? Is it like
it's very so? I think this yeah. I mean, I think this has an appeal to a certain segment of people who think that it's objective. The problem is it's very hard as a start to identify what you should measure in terms of performance, and it's very hard, even if you know what you meant to measure, to figure out how to measure it and to measure it well. And so I would say, this is like, I mean, this sounds to me like assessing developer performance by looking at the lines of code changed, and I mean, I think we both know that, like, I mean, I guess it's a famous example, like why lines of code change is a bad metric for developer performance. Or it's kind of similar. Let's say, you look at how many, I don't know, dashboards or bugs have people addressed, how many dashboards have people developed, how many bugs have they addressed. Maybe one guy is doing the really, really hard bugs and he gets one done per week, but it's really hard. Nobody else was able to do it.
I think this is how Elon Musk in first days when he arrived to Twitter, when he asked people to print out their code they made in the last.
Yeah, well, and I mean, now it's X and its value, what's 1/4 of the value, or how much has valuation gone down?
I don't know how is it.
It's gone down quite a bit, I think. So, no, I mean, yeah, I don't think that unless you're doing like maybe piecework, if you have a factory line and people are building, widgets, then maybe it makes sense. And that's what you want. That's what you hire people to do. You got 5 widget guys, and one widget guy is only building 5 widgets per day, and the other wasn't building 10 widgets per day. Then it makes sense because that's all you expect from them. But I mean, most of the work that you and I and I guess people listening to this do, it's sort of more complex knowledge work, and it's much harder to kind of think about what's the actual, like, what's the output, what's the value for the output that somebody produces, and how would you go? Like, it's very, yeah.
I agree with you, and I would add to that also. It's also depending from which angle people are looking. Leaders, whether they're looking to bringing benefit for the team or department or for the whole organization. I think this is also always the question.
I mean, I think it's how do you like align incentives across different?
It's quite often this dilemma that leaders expect you to do something which is only within the department, the benefit, but missing the point that you are bringing something for the whole.
Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah, like people who are kind of in the military, we call these force multipliers. Like they make, maybe they themselves don't. Yeah, maybe somebody doesn't like solve a lot of bugs, but he's instrumental helping other people solve bugs because they come talk to that person. Yeah, that's a good point. The other point I would add is obviously it's like, if you're running this kind of industrial Big Brother type performance assessment system, yeah, I mean, probably you're going to have issues with retention. Like not in the sense of firing people, but people leaving because they don't want to work at a place, that, yeah. Yeah, so that's very hard.
Good. So now the final question for the job interview, not for the whole interview, but for the job interview. It's what is your salary expectation?
Obviously, my range is, its lower bound is 1 million, upper bound is infinity. No, I don't. So, okay, serious answer in the Estonian context. This is I've never actually worked for a Estonian company, so it's very hard for me to figure out what a reasonable salary expectation for me in Estonia would be. I kind of know, and I have people I could ask about this more so than here for the US context. But here I'm like totally lost. I know it's less, but I don't know how much less.
But if it's an American company,
American company, I'm not going to say it. This is the second part. I think this is, if at all possible, something not to. This is like a bullshit power play. So
you will like this question to be asked during.
No, I say, what are you willing to offer me? I mean, why do I have to? I mean, obviously, yeah, employers thing sort of usually it's to their benefit. I mean, it also depends on the people that you're talking to. If it's a larger corporation, probably I would say that I would be more hesitant. If it's a smaller group, then people are more personable, less like bureaucratic, then maybe I would feel more open to sharing something like this. But I think as a general principle, I don't like this question because it kind of gives the other side kind of the negotiating advantage. Yeah. So maybe one way we could do this is we both take a piece of paper and write down our ranges and then flip it. Dun, dun, dun.
Well, that would be interesting.
Well, this interview is over. Sorry.
All right. So we're done with the job interview, and now I would like to ask you feedback. Was it like similar to what you had before, and what are your overall impressions?
Well, the most recent job interviews, the job interviews I've had more recently have been more, across the board, they have been less focused on kind of political science or politics topics and more focused on data science, data topics, stuff like this. So wow, the one question I always hope to get is what has been the most difficult situation for you in the past?
Well, I think that was the challenge you handled when you were in the National Army Guard.
I've got more. No, it's this. What is your biggest strength or biggest weakness kind of type thing. So thank you for not asking that. It's like, but
type of cliche question. Or...
Yeah. One thing I don't know a lot about hiring, but one thing, to the extent that I know anything about it, one thing I've been curious about is people who do structured interviews. So would you ask everybody else the same sorts of questions, or do you kind of tailor the questions for each candidate individually? And I think both have potentially advantages, disadvantages. So I'm curious, to what extent your interviews are structured across the board or specific for each one. Obviously, you have the podcast format
definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I have like certain structure, and I even have the categories. Okay, this question's change management. This category of question of motivation, because it's more focused with the twisted towards leadership, checking out the leadership traits, how people from I would say science background, technical background think about this leadership and management challenge. So it's twisted towards that. But and this is a set of I would say questions that might be repeating from time to time in the podcast. So it's kind of comparative. But of course, especially in the first block, there was a lot deep dive into your background, specific questions to your background, and this is always like tailored.
Yeah. And I think one thing, like these kind of leadership, change management, these sort of questions are difficult for me because I had sort of, on one hand, I had leadership experience in military, which is kind of very different. And on the other hand, I think like a lot of kind of more sciencey academic persons is the leadership experience in the sense of working with kind of, what do you call it, dispersed teams. So working with people who are all generally competent and kind of basically peers or near peers, where it's more like an issue of teamwork. And so you might be the person that's like kind of a leader, like the first among equals, but it's not like a situation where you have sort of direct reports in a company environment, which is military also isn't. It's a direct report, but in a very different way. So yeah.
I would think otherwise. Well, my impression was that in military it probably would be like the implementation is getting better compared maybe to the company.
What do you mean?
Well, in a sense, if you give order, then the order has to be executed 100%. But in a company environment, it doesn't necessarily mean if you give someone task and you did a poor job of further like motivating and doing other stuff, that it would be implemented as you wish.
I don't think that's necessarily true to that extent. I mean, yeah, in a legal technical sense, maybe it's true, but I mean, you also do have to.
I mean, for example, if you as superior you give order, then nobody can question you, right? I mean, among you.
Yeah, but to be long-term successful, people need to they need to accept you as a leader. You can't just yell at people and order them around, like quote unquote order them around. You also need to accept you need to accept people. You need to get people to accept you as a leader, sort of get buy-in. And so, I mean, I think this is the same in a corporate environment. Like technically you can tell people what to do, but they also need to get to a point where people accept that you're the one that tells them what to do and they're willing to do it. So maybe there's a little bit more overlap than I thought. But then, in terms of I think in a company environment, I was going to say you're kind of working in this knowledge IT world, you're working with sort of highly skilled people, but the skills are all sort of within the kind of same area. Whereas I think in the middle, I mean, you're working with people who are highly skilled, but it's a very particular skill. It's not necessarily like a knowledge economy type skill. So the kind of leadership style you need to have in this like stereotypical situation, like if you were like, say I wasn't, but if you were like charge of inference from two, yeah, you're not gonna, like you're maybe not gonna ask as much for input from your direct reports as you would in a company environment, where maybe it makes more sense to ask engineers or your other data scientists for input on how to deal with a project or something.
Yeah, I can imagine that when you're dealing with the crisis situation where you need to be fast, makes it a much kind of flatter communication.
Yeah. Whereas in the military, I mean, sort of in the crisis situation, you get much more authoritarian. That's where you get the more, you got to do what you're being told type thing. But anyways, I lost my train of thought.
All right. People who are watching us, there's different kinds of people. Some are more senior, some are less senior. But to those who may be starting their careers in the data science and the political science and later on applying AI, what advice would you give them?
I think, okay, let's see. So on a technical side, I would say that this is kind of a cliche, but you never stop learning. So you always have to keep learning, and it's something that you have to be able to like keep up on your own. You can't rely on your work to provide it for you. I think in terms of like the day-to-day work, I think one thing that's very important, that I find very important, is you need to be curious. So if you see something that doesn't make sense, then you need to have the curiosity that drives you to kind of look into it and try to understand what's going on. And I think specifically, the reason I say this, because in a lot of cases, this needs you to like discover mistakes that you have made. So, but then in the non-technical side, I think, in the real world, you work with other people, and so soft skills. If you go into if you do data science, or if you go into like other kind of IT work, I think usually sort of more technically minded. You want to do the programming, you want to do the modeling and data science, but a lot of the work is going to come down, and it's going to involve working with other people, whether it's people you're working on together in a project with, or where there's sort of more communication with stakeholders, presenting results, this sort of stuff. I think here, being able to communicate, figure out how to learn how to communicate better is good. I have a preference for agreeableness, so you need to be kind of a person who can get along with other people. Being the sort of lone wolf maybe works out if you're like a super, super rock star, but most people are, I would count myself in these, most people are like, we're somewhere like on the average. So you're going to need to work with other people who know something that you don't know. So yeah.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was Dr. Andreas Beger in the episode of Leaders and Engineers. Thank you for watching and listening us.
Goodbye.